The Cowboys Gamble, Part 3 of 8. How about them Cowboys? When Jimmy Johnson walked into Dallas, he brought with him more than a playbook. He brought swagger. He brought a hurricane. And he brought a new voice for a city that had just buried Tom Landry. How about them Cowboys? Wasn't just a catchphrase. It was a defiant shout into the void. It was the ego's rally cry. The Cowboys had been humiliated. They had gone 3-13, then 1-15, losing seasons piled like tombstones over what was once America's team. Fans were disgusted. Texas Stadium half empty. Commercials on TV begging people to buy tickets. The mystique was dead. And into that emptiness stepped Jimmy Johnson, straight from the University of Miami. He was brash, cocky, unrelenting. His Hurricanes had swaggered, danced, celebrated, taunted, and destroyed everyone in their path. He didn't just coach the body, he coached the mind. He made practices hell so the games felt like heaven. And he demanded the same of Dallas. Jimmy was the perfect partner for Jerry Jones because he carried the same hunger. Together they became a storm, but the storm began in chaos. Troy Aikman was drafted, yes, but he was brutalized in his rookie year. 11 sacks in a single game. Concussions piling up. Nightmares about missing shoes that revealed the weight of impossible expectations. Michael Irvin, the playmaker, tore his ACL, and the team collapsed to a 1-15 record. The city mocked them. The national press laughed. America's team had become America's punchline. And that is when the moment came, the Herschel Walker trade. Herschel was Dallas's only star, the face of the franchise, a Rolls-Royce of a running back. He was adored, admired, idolized. And Jerry and Jimmy traded him away for draft picks and players no one had ever heard of. The press called it madness. The fans called it betrayal. Even Herschel himself was stunned. It looked like lunacy, but metaphysically it was the perfect symbol. Because the ego always demands sacrifice. You cannot worship two idols at once. If Aikman was to be savior, Herschel had to go. And so the Cowboys crucified one hero to prop up another. This is how ego's kingdom works. It builds idols only to tear them down. And it demands blood sacrifice to keep the illusion alive. How about them Cowboys became the chant that justified the carnage. Jimmy shouted it not after a Super Bowl, but after a shocking playoff win years later. But its roots were planted here, in the storm of humiliation and ridicule. It was less a question and more a declaration. How about them Cowboys? Translation, we may be down, but we will rise again. But metaphysically, the phrase carries a deeper sting. Because every time the ego shouts, how about them Cowboys, it is really saying, look at me. It is identity theater. It is the dream shouting its own name, demanding recognition. Dallas was no longer a city searching for a team. It was a city searching for itself. And it projected that search onto helmets, jerseys, and highlight reels. That is why the early years of Jerry and Jimmy were filled with both ridicule and glory. Because when you try to make an idol into salvation, the pendulum always swings. First humiliation, then resurrection, then collapse again. The ego cannot sustain what is unreal. So here's the truth behind How About Them Cowboys. It is not a football chant. It is the sound of a mind lost in projection, trying to convince itself that glory in the world can cover the ache inside. The Herschel Walker trade proved it. Sacrifice one idol, inflate another. But the ache remains. Troy still dreamed of missing shoes. Irvin still carried his father's dying wish as a burden to fulfill. Jimmy still craved domination to silence the critics. Jerry still burned to be loved in a city that booed him as Darth Vader. And the fans still screamed for salvation in the form of touchdowns and trophies. That's why the metaphysical truth cuts so deep. The Cowboys weren't searching for wins. They were searching for identity. They were searching for salvation in bodies, in images, in the idols they erected on the 50-yard line. And salvation cannot be found there. Not in Aikman's arm. Not in Jimmy's swagger. Not in Jerry's gamble. Not even in Lombardi trophies. Because if salvation could be found there, the search would have ended. But the search goes on. 30 years later, the city still shouts, "How about them Cowboys?" as if the answer will change. But the only real answer is this: salvation was never missing. It was never in a stadium. It was never in a dynasty. It was never in a chant. How about them Cowboys is just the echo of the ego asking the wrong question. And the Spirit's correction is simple. How about the truth? How about remembering what was never lost? How about ending the search for idols and letting the ache dissolve? That is the only victory that lasts.